Tottenham have an entirely new way of playing, and it's going to be very fun to watch for everyone, because when it works it's great, but when it doesn't, oh baby, there's going to be some goals and lots of action. Let me show you an image that helps explain some of what I mean. This is a screenshot from Spurs versus Brentford, the first game of the season, obviously a 2-2 draw. Ignore the score, they were very good. Now, there's a few things you'll notice here from this simple image. Like, for example, this is the defensive line. It's very, very high. This is something that Spurs fans are not accustomed to over the last few years and seasons. They're pushing really high to try and squeeze the pitch, which means they're trying to counter press and win the ball high up the pitch. This is good, this is exciting. This is another thing you should look at. This central player here is a right back. That is Emerson Royale, who hasn't been that great over the last few seasons, but he's doing pretty well in his midfield position. And this is the left back, playing as the left winger here. But sometimes he also plays inside the pitch. Another thing you have is these are the half-space attackers. These are Oliver Skip and Heung-min Son. This could be Kulusevski. It changes all the time, but they're attacking these spaces between the fullback and the centre-backs where you've got number 9 pinning them. And the last thing you'll see from this one image is this lovely 4v3 on this area. Spurs like to get lots of overloads in these positions. So Ange Postecoglou loves to attack. He likes to get the ball forward and play with intensity and energy and constantly go forward. He wants lots of forward runs. Lots and lots of forward runs from his players. And he uses positional play. And this is how you divide the pitch for positional play. So you tend to have players in the wide space or the half space, and basically you have 2 in one vertical space and 3 in the horizontal. That's what you want. That's the kind of maximum that you have. And so it all depends on where the ball is. So if the ball is over on this side, the pitch will look a lot different. You'll have players like this, and this sort of shape is kind of relevant. You'll see this a lot in Ange Postecoglou teams. This sort of that, what do you call it? The time clock thing. An hourglass. As in, look at our glass of attacking football. But regardless, what you have is a team that defends from the front in a 4-4-2 kind of shape, so it looks a bit like this at times. They try and show the ball wide, and when the ball goes wide, then you get one of the fullbacks will push up to engage as early as possible to then show the ball backwards to make sure that you try and squeeze and press and win the ball back high up the pitch. Something, again, you haven't really seen from Spurs for a long time. The shape changes all the time. Ignore the numbers, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, doesn't really matter. What you get are different shapes and different phases of play depending on the position of the ball and the opposition. You want to always overload wide areas. So the fullbacks are really interesting because what they tend to do is come inside from here to be inverted. You see a lot of inverted fullbacks this season. But this is what they do. They don't always do it exactly like this. Sometimes they stay a bit wider in the wide space rather than the half space. Sometimes you'll get one staying wide like this, and one player will be here, one player will be here, and then the wide midfielder will pull out here, so you create this sort of shape. It's all about creating overloads, because if you have this many players together, you might be able to form a little diamond here to outnumber a 3 from the opposition in this part of the pitch. So then further up the pitch, you see even more excitement. What you get are 2 8s. Now you've got Skip and Maddison here in this example from against Brentford, and what we saw a lot of from Postecoglou's Celtic especially was these 2 8s get in behind the striker quite a lot, and they score a lot of goals. They attack these half spaces up there, so that was relevant. And they keep the space between defenders there so they can attack by keeping the wingers very wide. So you have Kulusevski and Son have to hug the touchlines, because that in theory stretches out an opposition back 4. If you are nice and close together, playing inside like forwards, then you can squeeze in a little bit as a defence, and then there's less space to be able to play through. If these are nice and close together, these guys can't get through quite so easily. If they pull out, then obviously that expands a little bit, and then you start creating those spaces, especially around the box. But then what you'll also see is that sometimes someone like James Maddison or Oliver Skip will drop a bit deeper. Maddison might come in here to try and get on the ball. And if he does that, that means that Udogie pushes up, so then the left back becomes an attacking midfielder in this position. Same with Skip, he might pull out wide here, so then Royale pushes through the middle here. And then what you end up getting is a midfield or attacking midfield 2 of Udogie and Royale, and Kulusevski's now over here. And we know that Son and Kulusevski want to attack these central spaces, but they have to really hold the width for the shape to work. And so depending on what side the ball's on, if the ball's on the right hand side, what you'll often get is the right hand side will overlap over here, so you leave the opposite forward on their own isolated. So these guys will push over and get a bit more narrow, want to overload everything on one side of the pitch, so that they're then free to sneak in at the back post to score. So lots of goals scored by this player when they're isolated at the back, but you need to keep one player wide, either Kulusevski, Skip, or Royale. Lots of rotations in here. It's a fun thing to watch, lots of rotations going on. So you'll see lots of Maddison on the ball in deep areas. You'll see lots of Maddison in the ball trying to run in behind. You'll see lots of Richarlison pushing defenders back. So it's good fun to watch, lots of attacking play, lots of excitement, but it's not perfect yet, and there are flaws in how this works already, as we can see, and this is where it starts to become fun to watch for everyone, not just Spurs fans. Well, actually the opposite of Spurs fans. Now the first problem we can see is in the profile of player they have playing on these wide positions. You have to get Son in the team, you have to get Kulusevski in the team. They're both brilliant players. But the thing is, both Son Son and Kulusevski tend to come inside. We know they do that rather than going outside a fullback. Now the reason this is relevant is because fullbacks will go tight to them here in the shape, when they're playing either side. So if they're on the right side here with Kulusevski, he's more inclined to have the ball and want to dribble inside with it, or he'll pass backwards because he tends not to take people on the outside. He can do it, did it a few times against Brentford. Well, what you want really is a really fast outside right who can go that way and that way, and so defenders don't know how to defend them because then they can't double up. They have to have 1v1. And if you 1v1 with this guy here and he takes you to the line here, suddenly everyone can start running back to try and defend against that. Then your number 9 has to be here to try and push them backwards. And as you do this, you create space between lines of defence and midfield, and that is where you start getting players like Skip or Maddison, whoever's playing these positions, can arrive because they'll get round them and they can put the ball to this area. So rather than going for the front post, they go to this area here. That's where you get lots of goals and shots from your number 8s. That's what Celtic did a lot of when the midfielders scored so many goals. But the profile of player and Son and Kulusevski don't suit that. They tend to come inside the pitch, so that's one little problem you've got. Now another small problem with the profile of player and how the system works is that often you'll get someone like Maddison will pull out wide into a space so they're not in the way of someone like Udogie. But Udogie is a good fullback, a good wing back. He's maybe not the sort of creative passer that you want to be able to break lines with passes to get players on the ball through this sort of thing here. Same with Emerson Royale. If he tries to get into this position here, as he often does, is he the guy to thread this ball through because teams will shut them down. And if they're pushed forward, playing these attacking roles, and they're trying to thread passes through, and there's a turnover, then what you see is because they're pushed so high up, there's a lot of ground to cover, behind these guys, a lot of ground wide to cover someone like Skip to get back into, and for the wide areas as well. So if they can squeeze up and counter press and win it early, that's good. If not, they face a lot of counterattacks this way. And that's one of the things we saw against Brentford, because Brentford sat back and sprung into those spaces time and time again as they knew they could, and that's where we saw a lot of transitional football between both teams. And this shape will leave those spaces and wide areas for teams to attack. They can attack these spaces with wide runners. So you'll often see you'll sit in opposition forward in these wide spaces and just wait for the ball to come out to them so they can then counter-attack. And because they push so many people forward, if you break the press, that's when you're in trouble. And if you think about Celtic dominated the league. They always had all the possession so they could do this. And not every team had the quality to be able to get out of it. In the Premier League, that is not the case. So they can't always play with a relentless attacking approach that as Postecoglou wants and that he's used to from when he's managing Celtic. And the last one, which is again to do with being so relentlessly attacking and pushing forward, is that if there are turnovers, what the opposition can often do is get runners and isolate this kind of back five quite quickly. So they don't get back into shape quick enough. You're going to have runners who get in behind these guys because they're playing a really high line. The line has shifted from being quite deep and cautious to being very high. So if a team has a way to get the ball out from the back, they can exploit the wide spaces, they'll get underlapping runners, getting in behind, and we've seen it quite a few times from opposition teams in pre-season as well, especially because they're playing quite an aggressive marking system. If a player is sitting here, say, as a striker, and they drop in, the centre-back will go with them to stay tight. And so if that then happens, the ball over the top can come in and someone can get in behind that line unless Basuma watches and drops. So there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things to learn. But we can see from a pre-season friendly against Barcelona, so it's not even the Premier League game, there's so many games in pre-season where they've been impressive. Here's Barcelona attacking Spurs, playing a high line, very aggressive. The ball's coming in from De Jong to this player here, drops in, I think it's Lewandowski. So he's dropped in, which means the centre-back goes with him to get tight. That's what they're doing, it's an aggressive man-marking system. Now, this player has to pass it backwards because of the pressure, which then means the back four becomes this sort of shape. You see he's pushed out, that's left this gap, which is automatically where this player is going to run in behind to get in behind that high line. So here what you want is to put pressure on this guy straight away. They're not quite doing it. These are the things that Postecoglou is trying to just get out of the team, making sure they're always pressing forward. They're not used to this. They're used to sitting back and deep and engaging it halfway. Now he wants them to go and close them down. So if they put pressure on, maybe this ball over the top doesn't happen, because what happens is the ball goes over the top and then number 6 runs in behind, they get in behind, and Spurs have to come back and chase and win it back. But what you have is a team who's really quick to recover, they race, they close together, squeeze out the space, defend it really well, and then they win the ball. And now what you see is Spurs out Barcelona. If you can find this clip online, it's fantastic. So what happens is they win the ball back, and the defense automatically drops into the shape that you want to get. And you remember the hourglass we talked about earlier? Well, here's a triangle they form instantly to get a little rondo around this guy here, and then other players drop in to make sure they can play, and you create the hourglass. This is what you want, this kind of shape. You've got 2, a 1 in the middle, and 2 here. And that gives you loads of angles to pass around the team trying to press you. So Spurs can now play out of a press, even though it's not exactly a relentlessly high one. They can pass their way out, and then they can move all the way up the pitch to the other end to get a shot on goal against Barcelona. It's a pre-season friendly, so you can't read all into it, but we see all the principles of play. We see wide players keeping the width. We see players swapping positions within set parameters and set roles. We see teams making sure they're forming shapes so they can pass around players and overload them. Here, Spurs have a 5v4, so they're obviously going to play out past this. And they move that 5v4 to wide areas. They do it all over the pitch, all over the time. But of course, in trying to create these overloads and trying to move between different shapes, there's going to be lots of times when the shape breaks down and the opposition can counter them. And so what we'll probably see from Spurs, this is what I think is going to happen, we'll see Spurs have lots of high scoring games where they score a lot of goals, but they concede a lot of goals. And there's a good chance, like it was at Celtic, they'll start slowly, have some poor results early on. But if it clicks, oh baby, it's going to be a hot dog of a team to watch.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.